Hey ratbags, it's Jade with my first impressions, or I guess actual feedback for the developers of Enshrouded about what I really thought about the game. Now obviously I've played Enshrouded quite a bit. I already did a promo video for Keen Games a few months ago where I showed off some of the building, and I was given an opportunity to show you guys some of the official gameplay on their Steam page for the next fest. So big shout out to them for that. Obviously I have got a big opinion about most survival games, and like always I'll always tell you guys what I really think. I think Enshrouded's got the potential to be a massive hit, but there are some key features they need to really tighten up, even for early access launch. I've been blown away by the improvements they've made since even just a few months ago when I tried it. The performance is definitely much better, the way the game looks is much better in the environment, and I've toned down certain things that were kind of a little bit annoying, like too much fog or too much not enough rendering. I've also known from seeing their community posts and social media stuff that they're working on the 4 gig of RAM requirement, and that's going to be reduced, or it will be reduced to that amount. So basically lower end systems will be able to play the game once early access is here. So if they can do all that in just a couple months before their demo, imagine what it's going to be like with early access and then of course a full launch. If you somehow missed what Enshrouded is, it is a 1 to 16 player co-op survival game that's going to be coming out. The idea is that it's a fixed map, you go off exploring, you take on enemies, and you've got this shroud that permeates the landscape. You'll have to go into this shroud in time limited fashion, hopefully extending your time in the shroud by finding special items or drinking potions or improving and upgrading your base. There's meant to be more dangers in the shroud, or even stronger dangers in the shroud, but also better loot. You're meant to go around finding special NPCs, and these guys will give you recipes and unlocks for better gear, better weapons and new items. All of this based on a voxel engine, meaning that you can have absolute control of how your base, how your castles, how basically you're going to build. You can even manipulate the terrain. And absolutely this is one of Enshrouded's biggest selling points, is the customization of your base designs. It's pretty much Minecraft but less ugly with just blocks, and really delving into chipping away and making bases really unique. But base building isn't going to be enough to sustain a whole game for a long time, and I think that's one of the first things I've noticed in Enshrouded. It is about going into these places and having a challenge. This game is made by the same people that made Portal Knights, and I sense that they're still kind of aiming for a slightly younger market, although some of the characters do look fantastical, maybe a bit more mature. It's certainly not appealing to young kids, but I do feel like it's quite simplistic, and the enemy design and the enemies that you come across in the first stages are quite simplistic. So that's the feedback, that's the first constructive criticism I'm going to get across. I want enemies to be much tougher, I want them to be tighter in how they move and how they attack you. Most games will have you starting out pretty simply right. Things are meant to be a bit easier to get the lay of the land and work out how things work. But the survival genre is pretty much known for mostly having hardcore experiences, whether it had been your face being ripped off 1,000 times in Ark, or tribesmen attacking you in Conan Exiles. You get the idea, it can be pretty brutal sometimes. Clearly Enshrouded wants to go down a little bit more of the RPG route, which again we'll talk about in a while, so it maybe doesn't need to be that hardcore experience. And they're very good at adding an actual proper tutorial, which is something so many games just kind of negate. But yeah, I do want them, as soon as you get out of that tutorial area, to really ramp up a little bit. The encounters you come across with enemies, different types of enemies, and make sure that they're all just a little bit tougher. I barely upgraded my gear. I did find better weapons and better magical staves, and of course bearing in mind it's just the demo, I still felt like I probably could have done all of this with just the most basic gear, as long as I had enough bandages. For sure, I know in the future we're going to have different types of shroud, so it looks like certain levels will be much tougher than others, and that's the point, right? You have maybe slightly better, easier overworld, and then you dive into these darker areas to have the real challenge. But I do think both need improving. The biggest example of this, or ease of combat, is how you can lock onto enemies with ranged weapons. Not entirely uncommon, certain games have it, I do believe Conan Exiles has it, you can lock on, but I do find it makes combat at the moment way too easy in Enshrouded, especially with ranged gear. I can't say I want them to remove it, but maybe reduce how much damage you do with ranged combat for now, until they can devise maybe a system where using lock on gets you maybe slightly less damage against enemies rather than doing it freehand. I don't know, that's a pretty tough thing to probably organise. I'm not really a game developer, but that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head to make it less removing the whole thing or just trying to change it and make it a bit more tougher. The times that I died mostly were through accidentally exploding barrels like this one, which I was desperately trying to get this guy to hit and blow himself up. It does look like Enshrouded isn't going to have anything like tames or creatures like that, so having the wingsuit and the ability to move around pretty rapidly is important to the game to get across the vast map, which looks to be like it's going to be a chonker. I still think there is a little bit too much speed with the character movement and stuff, and again, should be something we work towards with the RPG tree and the skills tree to increase our speed. I'm guessing there will be some of that in there already, but it still felt like I was way too quick and speedy just going about my daily business. Don't get me wrong, I don't want a slow-mo, I don't want to be bored trying to traipse across the country, but that's what wing gliders are for. So that, I guess, is the next feedback, the wing glider, just to angle it up a bit more. Give me a little bit more slower time to glide and hopefully be able to choose a little bit more and spend a tiny bit more time in the sky. And yeah, I'm going to just keep listing off the things I think need improving or changed. Teleporting and fast travel. It's way too easy at the moment to just fast travel to the central sphere and then just go from there, pretty much get a head start on wherever you want to go. That's not too bad with just that one fast travel, but I don't want fast travel to become this super easy thing too much. And the fact that you can pretty much teleport to home from anywhere seems a bit too much as well. Either create some way that we have to make our own special flames again to teleport from one flame to another. Admittedly, it does only work one way. You can only teleport back to your base from anywhere on the map. You can't necessarily teleport to anywhere you want to go on the map. But I do think there should be some cost. I don't really like gating stuff. It can be unfun and I can see why the devs have done it. But it does make traversing the large map that we saw in a demo fairly easy. And if the map is going to expand massively and we're going to see a huge landscape, huge continent to explore, then yes, this kind of makes more sense. But I still think it should be something, even if it's a basic kind of commodity that you have to craft and make or utilize so that you can fast travel, like a bit of your mana or maybe a bit of a cooldown on using it too much, something along them lines. Valheim's portals spring to mind. That's a great way to get back and forth, give players something to work on and make sure they're doing something that they're building when they get to an outpost or make an outpost. Of course, as long as we can just transfer through that without any restrictions. I am concerned about replayability. It is a demo after all, so of course there's going to be so much more, but the general loop is there. We find NPCs, they give us recipes, we unlock these recipes, craft new armors and weapons, and take on maybe harder bosses. Games like Conan Exiles that have static maps and games like Grounded, they have very much suffered because players can't find enough replayability in them sometimes. Conan Exiles has the purge system, which has been broken for years and has only just got a recent revamp. And the idea there is that it gives you something to do, some base defense and occasional attacks from different sways of NPCs. Enshrouded, I don't know if they are going to do that. That was something I thought they might be introducing, but I think focusing on the shroud is probably the best bet. It's there, right? That's the mechanic. It shouldn't be somewhere we go into like the dark zone in PvP games or something, where we're always going to guarantee to get great loot, but there will always be more difficult enemies maybe respawning in there. Not just a case of having different levels of the shroud that make things harder, but as you progress, the enemies should be progressing. And again, maybe that's happening, maybe they gated all of this for the demo just to get a feel for stuff. But every time I go in the shroud, I want it to recognise what level I'm at. I don't want to be going in there and handling enemies super quick and easy. And again, this might have happened. I didn't spend too long revisiting the shroud. Once I cleared out the different places that I had to, it was pretty much done and dusted. But this is where the replayability comes into it. By making enemies respawn, maybe in different variants, different elites, different kinds of enemies in places that you've already been, you've got to add the loot to match up to that. People want reward for their time in completing stuff. And yeah, the loot in Enshrouded kind of sucks. You get access to some pretty cool staves, but very, very soon in the demo, I came across way too many similar swords and axes. And again, I understand this may all change for the early access release. But given it is now within the next 2 months that's going to happen, I can't see the demo being that different from the actual early access game, unless they decide to delay it to work on anything. It's pretty bog standard, the loot, nothing really crazy jumping out at me as if like it's amazing or really changing RPG kind of systems with the attacks and magical powers. I understand they're a small team, and yeah, you got to keep your expectations in check, but definitely give me more variety in what I'm going to find, and give me more good loot as well. The amount of times I would bust open a chest and there'd be like some wooden logs in it and some string. It does feel a bit like Enshrouded's caught between being a full-blown survival game and an RPG. You've got nodes that you might need, things like flint, or possibly you might need bags of salt, and some of that stuff can be found in very specific locations. A lot of survival games pretty similar, some stuff you'd only find in certain places, but it'll be in large amounts, whereas in Enshrouded it felt very, very granular, that some of the stuff that you wanted to maybe make your shingle roofs out of, there was only like 1 or 2 places to go and get it. Given the size and verticality of the map with the rolling hills and mountains, I think it'd be really cool to add more points where we're going to see different types of ores and resources. I do absolutely love the way that they've crafted the blocks and stuff, or how it runs out basically, or converts into blocks, cubes, or whatever door frames, windows that you are crafting. Just drop in a crafting bench and crafting up these blocks and doing it that way. Got no problem with it. I think it's a great move. But yeah, give us more areas to get some of these ores and resources so that we can do crazy stuff with it. I think it was meant to be like an Easter reward that we found blocks of bone, as you only got it if you went into a certain underground temple. I don't know, blocks of bone doesn't really feel like that special a building material to me. Maybe that should be something that you just get given as a first off recipe. As I said, the building is one of the game's strongest features, but there are definitely some tweaks need to be made to the controls. Clearly they've got visions of console in the future because it's very tailored to a controller. And yes, I know most people play with maybe a keyboard on PC, but actually not as much as you think. I think last time I checked it was about half and half. So for someone that uses controllers a lot, there is too much going on with the building system and how it works in trying to choose. I can understand why, because with that customization, the ability to have certain blocks or different shapes, it does feel like you're gonna have to have maybe a bit more convoluted way to build, but it does feel just a bit cumbersome, some of the shortcuts that you press and the buttons that you utilize. The rest of the game's great in terms of combat and aiming and stuff. Like I said, apart from the lock-on, whether it's melee combat and stuff, I felt was pretty good. The movement, the jumping around and everything else was pretty good. The graphics, I'm really happy with. Like I said, a huge improvement. At first, it felt like the smoke or fog was just kind of glitching up stuff when I did a little promo video for a while. But now it's really starting to feel the atmosphere and it's blending in nicely with the environment. And it's looking like a world I want to build massive castles in. That said, this starting area particularly does feel very much just hilly. There's some nice plateaus and stuff like that, and I love coming across more ruins, so definitely want to see more of that stuff, whether it's outposts, ruins that I can take over, or dilapidated houses. That's really giving me that Fable vibe of roaming around an English countryside in a fantasy setting. But it would be nice to see more ways to get up some of these hills, whether or not we're going to maybe get climbing picks or anything like that in the future, or obviously just some natural staircases or ways to get up to the top of the mountains. Like normally you'll find a rise, and maybe it'll be something that we have to just build. But where's all the water in Enshrouded? Does it not exist? Are we not going to have rivers and lakes? I mean, that's fine if swimming's not a thing, but could we have like a boggy area, maybe a swampy area? Maybe that's some of that stuff is going to come. And I know that some kind of desert environment exists, based on the trailer that we've seen in the past. So I'm kind of nitpicking here. I know so much of this will probably arrive and there will be more variety, but it does fall back on that replayability. Conan Exile suffered because it was fairly small map in the end and people just got sick of seeing the same stuff. So having as many kind of Easter eggs and nooks and crannies filled with little hidden hamlets and stuff like that is really good. And I really like the fact there's one of them literally just nestled on a hill above the shroud. That was pretty cool to find this whole farm. When it comes to the NPCs, yes, they are basically just menus to get new gear and new recipes from. I think it would be cool if they added something more to comfort levels, or if you could get some more bonuses from building them specific biome homes, a bit like Terraria, where you would actually have to build an actual house. This would promote obviously the use of its main best feature, which is the building at the moment. Maybe it doesn't have to be overcomplicated, but if you build a small hut with obviously the blacksmith, and it's obviously got the forge in it and the smelter in it, that counts as 2 pieces towards his bonus, and then you can maybe get slightly better gear from him when you craft it or something along them lines. Give me a reason not to just put all my NPCs in one big large building. make me think about what I'm going to achieve with them, building either a village or a massive home that has different rooms for all of them. It does look like we will unlock new recipes from each NPC as you progress and maybe come across new materials. So they are going to continuously have a use, and I just hope that's the same for all NPCs. And I guess that's pretty much it. If you boil it down, it's make sure that enemy combat is a bit tougher and a bit more interesting and varied. Make sure that loot that we're earning is more varied and interesting, and make sure there's replayability with either the Shroud offering different levels of difficulty or repeating difficulties, maybe spiked up depending on how levels you are, but also making sure that our homes are useful and that we can utilise these NPCs, but also embed them into our lives a little bit more rather than just having them stuck in a corner. I love the animations. I think it's a well typed, polished game. As I was playing it, I didn't really encounter too many bugs or issues from the demo. A few tweaks to traversal and maybe some adjustments to the cost of being able to move across the map. Although again, we'll have to see how big the map really will be once it launches in early access to really truly game whether or not it's going to be necessary to have such ease and convenience or fast travel. I like the skill tree. I'm going to love just putting points into it. XP did feel like a grind getting there, but I can understand why. Obviously, if you're grinding out and maxing out an XP system within 8 hours and leveling up all your skills, then there's definitely something off with the balance. And I'm hoping that, yeah, more bosses will be even tougher and they'll be more varied in what we'll come across and face off against. There's a huge amount of games launching soon. We've got Return to Moria, although that's looking a bit ropey already. Of course, got Ark Ascended, the remaster. And then we've got Nightingale. I could see out of them types of games, Nightingale would probably give this one the biggest run for its money, as we all know what to expect with Ark. I think ENSHROUDED is leaps above so many of the games that I've tried and played in the last few months. It's got a really calming, just nice chill kind of vibe to it. But don't make it too cozy, don't make it too easy. Give me that extra challenge, like Valheim a little bit, where it's a tough ordeal sometimes, but once you've got through it, you really know that you've done something in the game. And of course, everything I've just said could be completely changed and everything could be happening the way I want it. We'll have to see when the full game is here and I'll be delivering news on it. Because I do think this is a special game. I think it's going to do bangers once it actually does release. So, as always, Ratbags, I'll see you for more Survival Games news, guides and opinions. And until then, laters.